Ladies and gentlemen, our next topic for discussion is on a very important subject, innovation. Do brands and businesses, especially in an Indian context, have an innovation risk deficit? Without the necessary risk involved in innovation, there is a distinct possibility of losing all things new, at least, and losing the human imagination at worst. So where does the innovation problem lie is the question, and what can we do about it? To discuss this, we introduce an esteemed panel constituting Mr. Sunil, Alagh, who has been the MD and CEO of Britannia for close to 30 years and now heads his own consultancy, SKA Advisors. We also have with us Mr. R.S. Rajan, co-founder and director of Livpure, Mr. Shashi Sinha, CEO of LHAMPL, a vertical of the Laqshya Media Group. The topic of discussion is innovation, risk deficit, an aspect without which new ideas, business, and even brands cannot grow. And to moderate this panel, we have with us Mr. Shekhar, Tiwari, Managing Director, Accenture. I'd now like to request our panelists and our moderators to kindly take the dais.
Hello everyone, thank you very much for your time and thank you very much for having us here. The topic has already been discussed and I'm just taking one quick minute to welcome the panelists also. We were just having a quick discussion before coming here in front of you guys. That what exactly is this topic and what exactly we feel. So I thought it'll be a good idea to just open up with the thoughts of each one, saying that what do you think, is this a reality that we are lacking innovation or the ability to take the risk, or that's a reality? So maybe you can start with you.
Yeah, I think that it's often said that we are not innovative and we are not doing enough. Maybe it's partly true, but I think the trend is changing. And if you see some of the data points in the recent past few years, there have been close to about 850 R&D centers which have been set up in our country. And over 450,000 people are getting employed there. So I think it's a trend which is changing, and we've always been in front of the globe in terms of soft innovation. And since they were giving us innovation at the bottom of the innovation stages, they're now realizing that when they need to step up on the more complicated part of the innovation, they are looking at India again. And if I speak from a startup brand point, we have made a brand in the past 4 to 5 years. We're a baby brand called Livpure in the water space. So taking on giants who have been in the business for 35 years and 21 years, we made a brand out of innovation because we did some disruptive designing, we did some disruptive technology, and we found a place under the sun.
Sunil, your thoughts on this? I mean, you have been at the helm of this for 3 decades, brand, sales, club with manufacturing and related problems. So do you think enough and more innovation is happening, or is just a perception that we lack innovation?
I think we've become a lazy nation as far as innovation is concerned. This is just my view on it. And one important thing, I want to introduce myself as being a Punjabi, and a Punjabi is not going to give any thought-provoking speech today in any case, because we're not capable of giving thought-provoking speech. In fact, if you leave a thought with a Punjabi, he won't know what to do with it and return it to you when you see him again. But innovation is a highly misused word from my point of view. Yeah. Every variant that's launched is considered an innovation. So for me, there's actually one kind of innovation which is at one extreme, which is, say, Wilkinson when it launched the razor blade, or when Apple launched the first iPod or whatever that was. That could be termed as innovation. And that's the real true innovation as far as I'm concerned. The rest, the other is launching variants of a brand. Like for instance, when we launched Tiger biscuits, and after that you say Tiger with banana, or Tiger with cashews, or Tiger with that. And that's not innovation. That's just sheer variants of the existing thing. So then you come in between, which is the real area of what we could term as what most of the world now talks about innovation. So you can have innovation in packaging, you can have innovation in pricing, you can have innovation in a product, You can have innovation as far as management techniques are concerned to get things going. So I'm just opening up the concept of which area of innovation do we want to speak about. And that becomes an interesting area rather than saying that I'm innovating when you're not. And I'd like to define it along those lines. And one quick last line is that innovation for the sake of innovation is irrelevant in my life. It has to be commercially successful innovation.
Correct.
I mean, there's no point in creating a product which is either 20 years ahead of its time, or it's so expensive that the market that you're putting it in they can't afford it. I mean, that for me is self-gratifying innovation.
Yeah.
And it's irrelevant innovation in today's context. Yeah. That's the way I would like to.
If I can just add some more color to it, and he actually touched on a very good point that everything in India comes in as quote unquote innovation, and especially if you look at it, what we used to call jugaad, somehow make it happen, is also termed as innovation. You are in a media company, right? And you keep seeing your standard patterns of advertisements or the similar kind of stuff, and he got a great example that Tiger, that may be an innovation, but then Tiger with cashew or Tiger with almond, that is not innovation. So being at a helm of a media company and the standard stuff which keeps coming, how do you like, let's say, define innovation in your industry, and how do you kind of practice that?
See, the issue is there is a limit to innovation also. I mean, if you are innovating on a car has a definition.
Right.
It has a systemic definition. So no matter how much you innovate on it, you have to still keep it within the limits that it being called a car.
Right.
In media and advertising also, we are connecting with audiences with a purpose. So as long as that is defined, there is a limit how much you can innovate. So I don't think there is too much problem with innovation in India. What I think is we do not have a very structured infrastructure to motivate innovations. And when a spark happens, how do you amplify it?
Yeah.
How do you structure it? And how do you then try and make a commercial success out of it?
So, and we were talking, right? The example which you gave is this, the teacher in Bihar. Sorry, forgetting.
So the example he asked, are we not innovating enough? I said we are innovating enough because see, we live. If we have to live, we have to establish a coordination with the environment, and nothing is more uncertain than the environment. So every day that you establish a coordination for your living, you are innovating. In India, also innovations are happening. So I gave an example of one Super 30 of one Mr. Anand sir, who runs a small outfit in Patna, ill-financed. He takes people from very lower stratum of the society, pays for them, teaches them, and year after year, his Super 30, each 30 of them have made it to IIT. So when I'm talking about innovation infrastructure, why have we not looked at that model and created something larger and say that every year as Anand sir sends 30 to IIT, we will send 100 to MITs and 100 to Harvard. Why have we not done that? So that is where the lack is. I don't think.
So scaling up, or let's say, and all of us hire plenty of graduates, management graduates, right? And when you go through, when you're in the process of hiring, generally differentiating a student from a CV is almost impossible, right? Or you'll have to have a various, a case study based approach or something to figure it out. The education system is still the same, they are either producing MBAs or engineers. And now we have multiple divisions like the media and all that. But my thought is that, is that the problem? Being the risk averse comes from there. Is it in our genes, or is there anything which they are missing, or we are missing, or we are unable to drive that kind of a change? I mean, I'll open it up to three of you, whom you want to take it first.
No, I mean, I think you raised some very valid points, and so as far as I'm concerned, it's rather simple because, look, even Livpure, I mean, from my point of view, is just there you have to innovate on your positioning, because most of the products in India are what I would term as 19-20 farak, when you're launching a biscuit or you're launching a soap. I mean, what is the innovation that you can do other than your positioning? Supposing you break the mold of all the way soaps are presented, or you break the mode of how almost every water company is saying that, look, you're going to fall ill, get a proper filter system and I give it to you, whether it's I'm sorry, or AquaGuard or whatever it is. So either you innovate something in your product which is a question that nobody else has got, that's proper innovation. Or you say that, look, I don't change my filter for 1 year. I'm just giving an example. Then that's an innovation when you have to change it every 3 months in anything else. But otherwise, you are left in a kind of a thing of getting into a market and saying, can I position my product differently? And that many people also succeed in doing when you have innovation. And I like to give you the example of our Tiger biscuits, because it was something which I started off with, not that I came prepared with it, but you know, we used to bang our head in Britannia against Parle-G, which was the glucose biscuit, if you think of it at that time. And Britannia had a product called Britannia Glucose D. Now we said, all right, they've got glucose, and if we want to take on this big giant, let's add vitamin D, and we got into glucose D. And we found that the consumer was just not ready to accept it. I mean, they were still buying Parle-G. So the only innovation that we did with Tiger was, but my product was the same. All packs were white. I made my pack red. I called it Tiger, and I didn't mention the word glucose, and the consumer thought this is a new product. So you positioned it in a manner where every mother wanted their child to be a tiger, every young kid wanted to be a tiger. And there was no research. I didn't research the brand name. In fact, the team fought me a lot, saying if you make it red, it look like Lifebuoy soap on the shelf. But I said that's the only way you're going to get noticed. So the innovation can take place in any way that you like to get noticed, and that becomes very important. There are management ways or techniques of saying, I will no longer have any vice presidents, because what happens to a CEO in an organization is that you have 3 vice presidents, and then you have 4 general managers, and the general managers keep coming to you all the time to say, when will I become a vice president? So now you've got to innovate on a management style where you say, there are no vice presidents. How are you going to do it? So that in itself can be an innovation in your organizational structure, where we talk about making it flat, but very few of us get down to doing it. Pricing. I mean, there was no such biscuit available for 1 rupee. I talk about Britannia a lot, and Tiger was the first biscuit where we put, but the idea came from your pan parag or whatever that was, which was hanging in shops in that little pouch. So I said, why don't we get into that, put 3 products in, and then panwalas will start keeping your biscuits. So you have innovation in pricing.
Right.
You can have innovation, but these are all to get you to get away, because you are in a market where you're next to impossible to innovate now. As you said, a car is a car. But how do you do adjacent innovation becomes very important, because now you take about 4 guys who've gone and innovated on that wristband that you wear. Everybody is, clocking, and you get your BP instruments, and but here now suddenly one guy comes up and says, wear this on your wrist, we'll count the number of steps you walk, it'll give you your blood pressure, it'll give you everything. So in a way, that's innovation.
That's innovation.
Making it convenient. How convenient are you making your product? So you can innovate now unless you come up with brilliant innovation like Pampers, which was done not by P&G, it was done by someone else. That guy didn't have the money to take it and make it big. I forget the name. And Procter & Gamble picked it up and said, this is a brilliant idea. We've got the money. We'll distribute it, and taking it forward. So what kind of innovation do you have? You can have innovation in supply systems.
Yeah. Taking it a bit differently, now we are seeing a lot of startups, as we said, some of the cities are becoming literally the startup hubs, when I'm seeing those startups, right, how many of them are innovative? They are coming up with let's say, new idea or a new product which is kind of, for the first time, versus, something which has been there, and, we are just capitalizing on it, making the variants or doing it faster, doing a kind of valuation and then up for sale types. What's your thought on that? And if I can just add that to it, for the last, let's say, topic for us, is the hurdles to make that happen, or hurdles to innovate. If you can just have some of the lines on that, because that we keep seeing, whether you're talking about the Indian business, Indian clients, or even let's say the international, because more or less everybody tries following this routine. So if you can start with you, and then we'll come back to you.
No, the fantastic thing about innovation is that the obverse of innovation is risk. And risk is a starting point also, and it is a consequence also.
Right.
That's the beauty of risk. Risk is intentional interaction with uncertainty. So you don't know what the outcome will be. You are innovating. So there is no existing market. Tastes and preferences are not in your favor. Existing technologies are not in your favor. Existing infrastructure may not be suited to you. But still you try to do that. So it is an intentional interaction with uncertainty. And risk is also a consequence because it is a consequence of taking some action.
Right.
Without knowing what will the consequence be. So you are now doing both. So it is a consequence of that. So when in India you see today, people are not taking those pure risks. In India, whatever innovation you are seeing is with an eye on valuation.
We are not taking risks because we are, as a society, as we are risk averse, or like not like enough. There's not enough and more encouragement. Like let's say, for example, China, right? If I just compare for a second, is that the reason, or what can we do to, let's say, increase the risk taking ability?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we must do as a practice is to encourage our youth, Youngistan, in the corporates, in the educational institution, to take those risks, dream big, and empower them. We should take the risk of empowering them with genuine respect to begin with.
Right.
You know, this fact that the boardroom knows it all is a fallacy which needs to be demolished. Because I have had some of the best teachings from people half my age. We have introduced the concept of reverse mentoring in our organization, and some of the fantastic ideas and innovations have come from them. I'll just give two examples. The first model that we launched, the ideas came from the service technicians who understood the pain points of a consumer in a kitchen, and they turned that pain points into a R&D brief, out of which came the innovation. The second is another set of young scientists, average age band about 27. They worked on a project with Berkeley, where they had a lab experiment, but today it is an arsenic removal plant in West Bengal, in a school in Dhapdapi, where it is spitting out about 10,000 liters of pure and safe arsenic-free water. And you have young kids who have a swipe card, who get a top-up every month and who go and get pure water. So this has happened because of innovation, and it has happened because we had the guts and gumption to empower the youth. And we didn't believe we know it all. We heard them, we gave them respect, and we empowered them.
Thanks. So this one more thing, and maybe I'll come back to you, maybe as last one. Very recently, we, in our own organization, we started as if like, we're calling it project to fail, right? Wherein you think of something which is seemingly impossible to do. Put your energies behind it. Even if you fail, no worries, you'll be rewarded for that failure. I'm sure in your long career, you would have seen so many ideas which are like, have potential but kind of not materializing because of either the ideas were not generally lack potential, or the backing didn't came through. And it's once again, being risk averse. I mean, you took literally that. I don't want to dwell more on Tiger, but I think it was kind of your sheer conviction which you kind of pushed it through, and it happened. Right. So is anything like that, and then we'll open up for some 2-3 questions
I think
from the audience.
what I would suggest in that case is the problem in India is that we're very hierarchical. So even if, say, a product manager or a young factory manager comes up with an idea, it then moves up the ladder and the responsibility comes to the guy who's on top.
Yes.
Now, what I've started, or I did start in some organizations when I was working with them, was that the concept of an opportunity manager, in the sense that anybody could come up with an opportunity, and you make the guy as the boss of that opportunity, and he's allowed to pick 3 members of, I'll give you a simple example of what was being done in Britannia during my time. Was that, say, a product manager came up with an idea that he wants to launch a kind of product, a biscuit. So if that idea was liked, but you have to give them a time limit. Don't get juniors to think of 5 years ahead and 10 years ahead. Right. You'll go bananas on that. So within 12 months, I used to ask them, who can give me the best result? So if they came up with an idea, then he was allowed to pick his team. And he'd pick the general manager, R&D, to develop the product. He'd pick the factory manager where he wants to make it. And he'd pick the finance manager who ensured that, and these were all 4 levels above him, but they all had to report to him for that opportunity, because you must get the person who has the passion to own it. And if you don't do that, you will lose the complete opportunity that has been created, if I can answer that question.
Thank you. So I guess the hooter was for the time thing, but I don't know if we can take one odd question from the audience. We'll be more than happy to, or we will get back to the organizer. There's one hand which I can see going up, so just address the question as for whom, and then
yeah, hi. My name is Riddhi Solanki. My question is, there are these two contradictory terms, branding and innovation. When I talk about branding, it's giving your customers what they expect. And when I talk about innovation, it's something where the customers don't expect. So how, as brands, should your focus be to face such scenario? Your focus should be more towards branding or innovation? That's what my question is.
Quick 30 seconds.
Yes, as a married man, I can answer that. Marriage faces the biggest challenge of continuity and variation. And how do you manage that?
Sunil?
No, I didn't understand, but I'm presuming that you are asking, is there any innovation on branding, is it? What was your question? How do you...
Content.
Branding means servicing the expectation. Innovation means creating something new. Obviously, there is no existent expectation for that. So she's saying branding and innovation, are they not contradictory terms?
No, they're not, because if you think of who should have launched the iPod, I think it was the first thing that Apple launched was the iPod. It should have been Sony, because Sony came up with the concept of the Walkman, okay, which was music on the go, because instead of carrying a whole speaker system on your shoulders, you had a cassette which played seven numbers on each side, so 14, and you tucked it in and you could run.
Yeah.
Now Sony became lazy, and therefore what Apple came along with was he gave you 1,000 records in that same size. So here was an innovation which you can relate to branding if you want. You can relate it to anything you like, but it was one company which had got the idea, innovated and went to sleep, and another guy comes with that same concept and rebrands it if you want. Apple was a rebranding of what Sony was doing. Yeah. So a brand is really an image that you create in the mind of the consumer. Now Apple, for instance, has an image that it's a company that will keep giving me new products all the time. So if they stop doing that, they hurt the brand, and therefore they have to constantly innovate, because that's what the brand represents. Whereas there are many brands that can just sit back and therefore don't link branding with that. But if your image is that I am a company that innovates constantly, then you actually push your whole organization to do it.
If I take the second question in less than 10 seconds, between branding and innovation, what to choose? Innovation, always. Branding will follow.
I would endorse that. We introduced a product with innovation, and the brand was built on the basis of a customer experience, which the innovative technology provided. Much as I may even invite a Punjabi's ire, I stick by the fact that we innovated.
I've always followed there are enough people to think for you in the market. The trouble is that we are never paying attention to successes or failures taking around you, and there are so many lessons to be learned that if you're a lazy Punjabi like me, you don't have to do anything. You just have to follow. In fact, I used to ask my team always, I had a line which was, you have to beg, borrow and steal. And that perhaps is the best innovation that you can think of. Begging for me was not holding out a bowl, but if you got a good team around you, you have to beg them to stay with you. You must ensure in your own way, I'm not meaning giving them a high salary or you're begging them, but you spend time with them, you do whatever you have to do with them. So you're begging. Borrowing was a concept of contract packing now. Why do you have to do everything yourself? There are so many specialists. You have to have your own darwan, or there's a security agent who specializes in that to give it to you. And stealing was exactly what Apple was doing from Sony where there's no IP. Steal the idea and make it into a bigger one. That's it. So ultimately at the end of the day, whatever you want to do as a Punjabi, there are a lot of people who are doing things we are not observing them anymore.
Yeah, the best innovation by Punjabis was making lassi in a washing machine.
No, I grew up in Bengal, so the trouble is don't leave a Bengali with a thought either, because he'll make a philosophy out of it.
So on that note, I think we'll wind it up. Thank you very much for being such a wonderful audience.